Welcome, everybody, and thank you very much for coming. My name's Paul Kenyon. I'm a journalist and author, and I spent a lot of time in Ukraine. I was there in 2014 when the Russians took Crimea, and then I was in Donetsk after that. And then at the beginning of the war in 2022, I was there and almost in error ended up at Hostomel Airport on the first day of the war, believing that the people who were coming out of the airport towards us, pointing their rifles at us, I thought they were friendly Ukrainian soldiers and went over to greet them, and then realized they all had orange and black stripes down their soldiers and they were Russians. And then I made 2 or 3 panoramas there during the first 2 or 3 months of the war, and then was in Odessa and Kherson and all down the Eastern Front. So that's why I'm presenting it tonight. So I've read this book, and it is fantastic. And I'm going to introduce you to everybody on the panel in a minute. But first of all, I'll just say a couple of things, if I can, about the book. So this book is not just about war, but it's also about the failure of the West to fully commit to defending Ukraine from an authoritarian, colonial, murderous regime advancing slowly, because that's what it's doing, into Eastern Europe. It's also about politicians and how they're willing to sacrifice lives attacking symbolic targets rather than proper, strategic, though less headline-grabbing missions. It's about routine death, and it's about the grinding mundanity of war, as well as personal sacrifice and national sacrifice. But mostly, it's a searing personal account of a young woman's loss of innocence, loss of everyone she holds close, and her growth not just into a soldier, but into a warrior. So I'm going to introduce you to the panel, if I might. So Yulia, you will recognize Yulia because she's wearing a uniform. Lieutenant Yulia Mykytenko, she was born in Kiev in July 1995. She co-founded the female squad of the 16th Regiment of the Self-Defense Force during the 2013-14 Euromaidan Revolution while studying philology with, I think, a special attention to the Ukrainian language at university. She married a soldier, Ilya Serbin, in 2015 and joined him in the army in Donbass in the following year. After Serbin's death in a Russian bombardment, she led the first class of female cadets at high school in Kiev and later worked with veterans. And when I say Kiev, by the way, I'm just going to stop there because people are going to say, why is he saying Kiev? There's a very long story about this, but my fixer in Ukraine always said, ignore when the BBC tell you to say Kiev in a very long E. That doesn't exist, that word. And he's got a PhD in medieval history from Ukraine, and he said it's always, however you say it, it's got 2 syllables, and it is Kiev. And they will have much better pronunciation than me, obviously, so forgive me sometimes when I try and make it clear there are 2 syllables, if it sounds like a Russian pronunciation, because it ain't. And then on February 24th, back to Yulia, she re-enlisted and now commands a 25-man reconnaissance and attack drone unit on the front line in Donbass, and it's called, fantastically, the Hellish Hornets. So welcome to Yulia. And then right then we've got Nazar Yatsyshyn, who is he's a fixer, very, very important role in Ukraine, and we'll talk about fixing and why it's so important, even though a lot of it is behind the scenes, a really dangerous but important job. And he's done a lot of translation over the year. Born in Lviv, one of my favorite cities in Ukraine, in 1990, earned a degree in linguistics and translation from Franco-Lviv National University. He's worked as an interpreter for various media and aid organizations since Russia's full-scale invasion. In the winter of 23 and 24, he participated in over 24 hours of remote interviews that formed the basis of Lara Marlowe's book, How Good It Is, I Have No Fear of Dying, which is, of course, what we're here to talk about. He now works as an interpreter for the United Nations in Kyiv. And then sitting beside me, Lara Marlowe, who wrote the book. She was born in California, studied French at UCLA and the Sorbonne, and international relations at Oxford. She began her career as an associate producer for CBS's 60 Minutes in Paris. Is that 60 Minutes based in Paris, not 60 Minutes? It sounds, sorry, 60 Minutes in Paris. One of my favorite programs. They've always refused to employ me, but I love it nevertheless. It's fantastic. Then she worked in Beirut for 8 years with the FT and Time magazine. She's reported for numerous media outlets and was a foreign correspondent for the Irish Times from 1996 to 2023, covering over a dozen wars and winning 4 press awards. Since Russia's 2022 invasion, she's completed 3 reporting stints in Ukraine. How Good It Is, I Have No Fear of Dying is her 5th book, so welcome to Lara. So what I'm going to do, we're going to have a fairly informal chat for the next 30, 40 minutes or so, and then we'll open it up to the floor. I'm going to start, obviously, with Yulia. And what particularly, as a writer myself, one of the most impressive things is the paring down of language when writing about extreme destruction, death, horror, personal loss, and using quite perfunctory, straightforward phrases rather than using anything too colourful, too flowery, if you like. So I'm going to ask you both, if you don't mind, but why was that so important to you? So we're talking really about styles of writing, that very pared back, that very stark form of writing. Why did you choose that style? How important was it?
First of all, thank you for coming, and I would like to apologize. I'm not very good at English, but I will try to do my best. So it actually wasn't like a choice of style. We didn't discuss with Lara like a plot or characters or whatever, because it's not like a standard book. Actually, it's almost my biography, very open-minded, and I like make myself naked. So some stories were very hard to tell. Basically, it's how the language of the book is how I actually talk for now, being in the army. So it's just like very strict. And when I read that, actually, I extremely fond of Remark. I don't advise to read it at war. I did, and it was a bad idea. But I very fond of Remark, and it was very important to me. So book be very clearly with no like wonderful words, because it's not
clever actually. I hadn't thought of it like that. That it's maybe how soldiers talk to each other. So it's direct, it's to the point, it's the kind of message you would put over a radio. There's no spare language because there's no need for it.
Of course, yeah. No time, actually.
Lara.
If I may interject here, Yulia is a soldier, through and through. And soldiers are not terribly talkative or expressive people. They tend to say yes, no. And quite a few times through last winter, I would ask Yulia a question, and she'd say yes or no, or And even, through the computer screen, I felt like I was pulling words out of her. And on the good day, and sometimes you were very tired too. She has an exhausting job, and she's up very late at night watching, drone feeds and this sort of thing. And on the bad days, it was just sort of monosyllabic answers. And on the good days, I could get her going. And she'd really tell me about herself and tell me about her experiences. And Nazar, of course, was the intermediary, because I wanted to get every nuance and every word. So we started out in English and then decided to do it in Ukrainian, translated into English. But maybe, I think it's a combination of Yulia having a soldier style, and perhaps I have a journalistic spare style myself in writing. I never thought about it.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that's so impressive about it. Having spent a lot of time in Ukraine and other war zones, getting soldiers to talk, you're right, is very difficult. So there is this sort of unwillingness, near grumpiness, but why should they share these very personal accounts. And so that's what was so impressive. I found it very revealing. I feel as though I know Yulia extremely well, even though I've only met her for the first time tonight. And that's all about your writing and how you manage, and your research and how you managed to drag that out of her. It's brilliant.
When she said remark, I think everybody in the audience probably knows All Quiet on the Western Front, which appears 2 or 3 times in the book. And I read it when I was writing the book in Howth in Ireland, and I was just amazed by it. And I thought, wow, you know, if one could even hope to do a fraction of what he did for the First World War for the Russo-Ukrainian War. And then I asked, I made Nazar go and buy it and read it in Lviv, and I was going to send it to Yulia in the trenches, and she'd already read it, of course. But we did talk about Remarque's book.
Just something about the practicalities, because you specialise in drones, and I've obviously seen a lot of them whilst I was in Ukraine, and we hear about them on the news, but I don't think people here understand just how significantly they've changed the face of warfare. So from somebody on the front line whose life relies on drones and the success of the Ukrainian army relying on drones, just tell us, A, how, not technically how they operate, but just how important they are and how crucial it is that you get more of them.
We are using few types of drones. First, it's like surveillance one. It's Mavics, DJI Mavic drones. We're using them to observe like a very front line and like a few kilometers above of each. Sometimes not sometimes, but we started to see how Russians attacking us from the very like 10 kilometers, and we can just put our artillery on the right way and call our FPV drones pilots, so they just get ready and started to resist the attack. Also FPV drones, I don't know, I think that most of you saw these videos from FPV drones, how we attacked Russians with them. And also we are using UAVs, it's unmanned air vehicle, for reconnaissance, and we can see like 20 plus kilometers above the front line, and we can just predict what actually is going to happen. We can find like a headquarters of Russians and also put an artillery on it. And also we are using these big agro drones, which are basically using in agricultural, I mean, they're using for a seeding or whatever. We use them to put down a big, I don't know, grenades to Russian positions. And for now also we are using it for logistics, because most of our losses it's due when rotation and logistics going on. I mean, Russians also have drones. They see our movements and also started to shell us. And which is why infantry, many losses among infantries, it's because of logistics. And which is why for now we are using them to put some water and to drop some water and food for our infantry. So it's very crucial for Ukrainian army. It's really, and also it's a technical.
No, it's really interesting. You told me yesterday that the agro drones carry 15 kilos of food and water that you can drop in the positions, so that soldiers don't have to go back and forth, because that's when they usually get wounded or killed.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think most people here, we tend to think of drones as something where you can view potentially enemy lines, but the idea that they can take in provisions and also obviously drop lethal ammunition, so important. And you come to a sort of impasse in a way in that both sides are using them against each other, so movement around the front becomes very difficult. But I was particularly struck by one of your scenes where because you're able to watch things in real time, so you can be sitting there back in a bunker and watching your comrades out on the field, and if something happens, there's a kind of a maddening element to not even being there to be able to help them. And you describe very powerfully sitting there and watching one of your colleagues be blown into pieces and watching and being helpless. And that's sort of, it's not the downside of it, but I'd never thought of it like that before. Tell us a bit about some of the things that you sit there and watch.
To see how my comrades been damaged, it's maybe the worst thing. From the one hand, and from the other hand, we can observe the exact place where they are, and we can send an evacuation group. They might be wounded, or they might be already dead one. But anyway, we took all of our comrades from the battlefield. I mean, each of Ukrainian soldier is deserved to be buried in near home and near family. I would say that it's a bad one thing. I like watching while Russia attacks us. I like watching how we hit them. I mean, it's like sort of adrenaline, and you're just calling the headquarters and then to our artillery, and just started to call the pilot and tell him where to see and how to see, so the artillery can do their job much better.
It's slightly difficult, this, because I could sit here and talk to you all evening and only talk to you and because I find it absolutely fascinating for so many different reasons. I'll just ask you one more question, then we'll just open it up a little bit and talk about fixing and the writing process a bit more. But reporters, obviously, we go there and we go quite close to the front, and then we keep our heads down and keep out of trouble as much as we can. The idea, the psychology of going the next step and knowing that you have to kill or injure or attack the people coming towards you, or at very least defend against the people coming towards you, is something that I think you described, Lara, amazingly well, because I'd never thought of it in some of those terms before. But what's done out for me is that you do say, it's almost like an admission that you found, what do you say, the enjoyable adrenaline rush of being under fire. And I thought that was quite an interesting use of words, and you kind of allude to it a couple of times, but the enjoyable adrenaline rush of being under fire. And people might be slightly surprised about that. Just tell us what you mean by that.
It's like the feeling that you are playing with a death, and
Heads or tails.
yeah, and yeah, sort of, and but now I feel that there are much less chances that I could stay alive. I mean that, you know, when you come to the front line, you're just like caught the wave of war. It's quite simple. I know it's quite hard to explain, but where you're on the front line, you just have this feeling when artillery started to shell, you know that it won't hit you right now, but somehow it will be in the future. And the more you are standing on the front line, the less chances you have to stay alive. I mean, they're like become more less and less.
Yeah, it's like each roll of the dice, and the odds are tightening all the time.
Yes.
But I thought it was very brave of you to, it's not really an admission, but to give that insight into the psychology of it. So I thought that was fantastic. Lara, let's just come back to you. And how, because you, as a fantastic journalist, and somebody with an incredible sort of backlog of stories and an amazing career, you obviously recognise this as an extraordinary personal story that you could tell, but also bring in a lot of international affairs around it. Tell us at what point and how you recognise that this was, I mean, there's plenty of people fighting on the Ukrainian front line, very few women, but only one Yulia. And how did you realise that?
It was really like an epiphany. It just came to me one morning in the shower about 3 weeks after I wrote an article about women soldiers in the Ukraine war. And the article had appeared in the Irish Times. It was behind me. I wanted to spend the winter writing a book. And I'm fortunate enough to have wonderful agent who's sitting right there, Jonathan Williams, and a wonderful publisher who's sitting right there, Neil Belton. And I just had this inspiration one morning. And so the first thing I did is I rang Nazar in Lviv, and I said, I want to write a book about Yulia, because I must say in 43 years of journalism, very few people I've interviewed have made as deep an impression on me. And I felt that Yulia's life somehow represented the life of independent Ukraine. She was born 4 years after independence, and she'd gone through everything that her country had gone through, and especially through the last 10 years of war. And so I wanted to tell the story of Ukraine, and the best way for me to do that was through one person.
I thought that, by the way, sorry for butting in, that's so correct. It was so well done. The idea that you were there at Maidan, and that was your kind of coming of age, and then going to Crimea, and then albeit being in Donbass, and seeing some of that. And that fitted in so well. So you're basically telling the story of recent conflict with Russia through one individual who grows up through it, which is a fantastic narrative device.
And also, not only the story of conflict with Russia, but Yulia spoke Russian until she was 17 years old. And it's this drifting away from Russia and actually coming to consider Russia as an enemy because of the invasions, which I think, she was talking the other day about her father considered Russia to be a brother country until it invaded Crimea and Donbass. And so she went from having grown up reading Russian books, watching Russian television, speaking Russian at home, to a very dedicated Ukrainian patriot. And that evolution, was really important to her and to Ukraine.
Yeah, and that evolution, as you say, with the whole country, because there are plenty of people that we all meet when we're there who will have once spoken Russian and not really thought too much about it, and then you understand about the colonialization of the language and the fact that Ukrainian as a language was repressed and prevented, and then the rediscovery of it, really from 2014, but more powerfully from 2022. And all that comes across really well, because it's not just a war story. And I think that putting in that detail about the evolution of the language and the change in people's views about their more powerful neighbor is really important. And Nazar, let's just talk about you, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Because I think a lot of people, when we say the word fixer, they think, what do? Book hotels and stuff? And that isn't it, is it? He does that. I've worked with fixers who say, I'm not booking hotels, Paul, you book the hotels, it's beneath me, and I end up doing it. But I just think it's one of those, it's such an important role in television and newspapers and radio, and it's very rarely seen in any of these mediums. And I think you should, if you don't mind, just explain what you do and why it is so important, if it's not too embarrassing for you.
Sure. Well, to be honest, I didn't know what a fixer was before I became a fixer. When they were looking for a fixer, I was like, well, I don't really know how to fix things. What do you mean? But it turned out that, well, I used to translate. I've been an interpreter for more than 10 years now. But being a fixer is like being half a journalist, half a logistician, half a translator. When the war started, it was a shock to me, I'll be honest with you. I did not expect that to happen, and I didn't know what to do. And my first initial reaction was that I have to do something. I have my skills, and all of a sudden, a lot of journalists flooded to Lviv. And there was a lot of demand for English-speaker fixers who could help them write stories. I started actually volunteering at a TV station that wanted to broadcast their news in English. And later, I was introduced to Lara. And I thought, okay, this is my great opportunity to contribute, to do something, to tell the truth, because I believe that war could not be left unnoticed. I believe that it was important to tell the truth now. And well, thanks to the journalistic skills, and Lara actually pushed me to the border. Sometimes she said, like, no, we have to find him. We have to, we have to call them. We have to do this. We have to do that. And it was an incredible experience.
Yeah, I've got a fixer who I always use in Ukraine. And at the beginning of this part of the war, so in February 2022, he lived in Bucha and his family were in Bucha. And just to give you an idea of how committed some of these people are, so my lovely fixer, Taras, he said, I kept saying, why are you on the phone? You're constantly on the phone. We've got so much to do. This is 2 days into the war. And he said, my family are in, they're there and it's coming under fire. It's quite dangerous and things. For the next 7, 8, 10 days or whatever, well, in fact, for the next month, he stayed with us. His family was in Bucha. And I kept saying, if you want to give up on this and go and look after your family. And he said, no, I will. He would try and get back there in the middle of the night. And he would always get back to us first thing in the morning. So, and throughout the day, he'd be making phone calls to his wife and his child, trying to get them across that bridge out of Bucha back to safety. And you just think, these people are prepared to risk their lives. So, there's a great respect I have. And that, yeah, it's particularly interesting at the beginning of the war this time. You're right, you describe it very well, because everybody was running around saying, we need fixers. And it was wrong to say, I'm not a fixer. If you're Ukrainian, you should just say, I'm a fixer.
I learned that. Yes, I said.
Because there were large sums of money.
Tell me what to do, I'll help you.
There were large sums of money being paid, but also it was a very important moment for people to be able to show their support for their country if they didn't necessarily want to fight. But if you could speak English and you can show reporters around and you can point them to the most important moments. So my fixer on that first day took us to Hostomel, but he thought he was just going to go there because it was near Bucha and we might be able to get a nice cup of coffee. So and it turned into something rather different. But it is fantastic, and fixers all over the world are so important to our stories. Yulia, just back to you. Another passage that I was really struck by was that when you describe it, Lara, really, really well, but it's the idea of coming back to sanity, to leaving the front, getting back to Kiev, or even further west in Ukraine to Lviv and maybe to the Carpathians, and meeting people who are not involved in the war, and the come down, and the realization that actually your kind of urgency and the bubble that you've been in and the risks that you've been taking and the family that you've formed with the people around you doesn't really exist in the rest of the country. And I was particularly struck by you talking about a friend who you named there, so there's no problem me doing it, called Victoria, and you're meeting with her and finding out that actually, even though you were so close as student friends, you don't all share the same views. Will you just talk us through that moment, because I thought it was really powerful, if you don't mind.
When you met, when you were in Kyiv, and she said, you discussed conscription for women, remember? And she didn't want to. She said Ukraine is going to lose the war. Remember?
Yeah, I thought it was called Victoria.
Oh, there were two. There were two Victorias in the book.
Sorry.
Sorry. Actually, I'm still asking myself, and I still don't know how to react on that. Actually, and it's not quite true that the war doesn't exist for the rest of the country. I can clearly understand that a lot of people a little bit tired. Somebody says not as much as me or my comrades, but war is very exhausted. It's really exhausted because we have a lot of rules in Ukraine for now in a period of war, and I think that it's very it's a challenge for civilians to live such a life. From another hand, I'm quite happy that I have a place where to back from a war. I'm very happy that I can go to the cafe or to the restaurant and just eat delicious food or have some electricity, which is not actually okay for the rest of Ukraine also, but at least it's much more than in the front line. The one thing that I really ask for people, just live your normal life, because this is the reason why militaries are on the front line. But please don't forget to donate and remember fallen soldiers. We have a tradition in Ukraine that every day at 9 o'clock there a minute of silence. And everything stopped in Ukraine, and everyone remembers the fallen soldiers in the front line. So yeah, I just and so, yeah, of course, sometimes it irritates because I had some vacation in the west of Ukraine near the border, and they're like completely far from war.
Yeah, and they basically say, look, let's just forget Donbass and move on, give it to
Yeah.
Russia. But that must be incredibly frustrating. You and your colleagues are risking your life, and you've got
Yes.
other Ukrainians in the West sitting there at cocktail bars effectively saying, forget that, but let's just all split and get on with our lives.
Actually, I believe in fate. Because as I mentioned, in the front line, death is always near you. And you started to believe in such things which you not recognize in normal life. And I noticed that when person deny something that's going on around the consequences will be anyway. I mean, missile can like destroy house of this person, or we had in our company a few guys who were afraid to be on the front line, but they were like not forced, but they were asked to replace those one who are very tired, who were there for a long period of time. And the interesting fact is that they were actually badly injured, those one who were really afraid of. And those who have been in many of assaults, they stayed alive. So I think, I really believe that each person will have their own responsibility for their choices. And it will be it might be in have many variants of it, but it will be anyway. So it's like my self-affection.
Okay. I also thought it was brave and good journalism to be prepared to criticize or at least question various politicians, even Zelensky. And I think that was quite an important part of the book. Just tell me how important you thought that was, in the sense that this isn't just a personal story, and it's not a piece of propaganda saying, why isn't the West giving more money? So there is criticism not just of Zelensky, but obviously of the West, and also of some of your, or at least one of your nameless commanding officers, which again I thought was brave. How important do you think that was, to put that criticism in as sort of balance, so it's not just all propaganda-ish?
It wasn't really a balancing act at all. It was just part of the story. And obviously you can't write a book about Ukraine without talking about Zelensky. And Yulia's attitude seems to have softened or improved. I'm not sure how I should put it. But when we were working on the book, she was very cross with Zelensky because Ukraine was not prepared for the war. Mm-hmm. And as a soldier, she felt that he had neglected the military. And I'd heard this from other people in Ukraine. I'd heard it from other politicians as well. And her father took his own life, self-immolated on the Maidan, because he believed that Zelensky was capitulating to Russia back in 2020. That was through the whole complex process of the Minsk Accords and the Steinmeier formula and so on. I won't bore you with all the diplomatic angles of it, but the fact was that Ukraine was giving up territory in Donbass, and the Russians were not fulfilling their part of the bargain. So I think there's a personal aspect for her as well, that her father tried to see Zelensky, and Zelensky wouldn't see him. And but now, lately, what I'm hearing, and I should let Yulia answer this for herself, but she believes the country has to be unified in war, and I see this too among other people I've interviewed in Ukraine, that any differences have to be set aside until the war is over, and that's a very strong attitude. And I think people in general feel that Zelensky is representing the country well abroad, and there's an appreciation of that. I hope I haven't misquoted you.
Yes, it's true. This is our president. It was our choice. I mean, the choices of my citizens. And I'm pretty sure that we will deal with all that bad decisions after the war, really. And personally, I have a lot of questions to many of our politicians.
And officers.
And officers, yes. And I will ask them, in case if I will stay alive. But anyway, me and also my comrades, they will ask anyway these questions.
Let's just talk very briefly about the delays in finance of equipment and ammunition from the West and from America in particular. I think people might be surprised to know just how sensitive frontline fighting is to decisions taken in America and the rest of Europe, and how this isn't just something in a distant debating room, that affects your day-to-day activities on the front and how you can defend yourself. Just tell us, because you discuss this, don't you, on the front? You discuss whether or not funding is going to come through and how quickly it will change what's happening there on the ground.
Honestly saying, I don't have much resources on geopolitical stuff, but of course I'm observing the help which Europe and US give to us, and I hope they will continue to do that. But when it was a delay from the US, that they were supposed to give us 31 billion, yeah,
Billion.
yeah,
61 billion.
yes, and it was a big delay, and actually we felt that very physically, because we really had a very small amount of
ammunition.
Yes,
So this is a 6-week delay that you felt on the front?
Yes, and it was very, very crucial for us, actually. And this is the time where Russian taken advantage and started to attack us.
Because they know as well, sorry to interrupt, Julia, but it's really important that people understand that when there is a delay like that, the Russians obviously don't live on a completely different planet. They know there's a delay and they capitalize on that moment.
Yes, and we were just making some sort of shells, homemade, just to preserve our infantry.
Just before we open it up to the floor, which we will do, obviously, the title of the book is How Good It Is I Have No Fear of Dying. And I'm sorry to ask you this, and it is a bit of a cliche, but it'd be wrong not to ask you, do you have no fear of dying?
No, at all.
What motivates you? Because this is it's deep-rooted, isn't it? And there's a moment, we were just talking very briefly upstairs before, when you say, when you first go in, you're thinking, you and your husband at the time, you were thinking, it's a bit like Bonnie and Clyde. There's a romanticism about it. There's a sense of adventure motivated by nationalism and by determination to defeat Putin's armies. But what deeply motivates you now to continue, as you said, the repeated rolls of the dice, the gamble?
Actually, I have only 2 fears in the front line. First one is to be imprisoned in Russia. Is it right to say?
In Russia.
Capture.
Yeah. Because I completely understand what they will do with me due to my previous story. Mm-hmm. And second one is to can I say that? Because it's
well, I haven't heard it yet. Go on, what is it?
Okay, the second fear is a lot of soldiers actually have that fear. It's a fear to be to death during your doing your pee or whatever. It's like how I'm going to die with my trousers down. It's awful.
Okay, you didn't write that in the book, but that's interesting. Yeah.
I wanted to say something. Yulia showed me a photograph from a drone feed yesterday, and it's very blurry, but you see a man, and he's actually going to the toilet in a trench. And I said, you saw him. There was an FPV drone. They could have killed him, and they didn't kill him because it would have been a horrible thing to do. I mean, somehow, but This is the kind of thing that she lives through all the time. I did want to, you mentioned the title, and I wanted to say that that is not original in the sense that it's the first line of a very famous poem in Ukraine. How good it is, I have no fear of dying. And it just popped in. I was walking down the street in Hoth one day, and it popped into my head. I said, that's the title. And I thought of it because Yulia is not afraid of dying. Her husband was not afraid of dying. Her father was not afraid of dying. And all of those Ukrainians who are fighting now for freedom and independence are not afraid of dying. And so I thought it was really an appropriate title.
Yeah, it's a powerful one. Okay, well, shall we open it up to the floor? I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. And there's a microphone that's going to come round. Just because the microphone's over there, we'll just start over there.
Hi, thank you very much. And it sounds amazing book, Lara. I just came back from Ukraine. I've reported from there a lot. And
Christina,
everybody,
you should introduce. This is Christina Lamb of the Sunday Times.
Everybody I was talking to talked about the controversy over the conscription gangs. And I just wondered how you feel, Yulia, about conscription gangs, and which, in case people don't know, they've changed the law, and so these gangs are going around picking young men up from different places. And the other question, which I guess is related, is just how you feel the war is going, because it does seem as though the Russians have made advances in the east in the last couple of months, whether it's taking Vuhledar, moving on Pokrovsk, and moving on Kupiansk. Thank you.
Thank you for this question. Actually, about forcing people to go to the army, even inside of the army, we're just arguing all the time about that. My personal thought, maybe 1 year ago, I would say that I am completely against that. Because not very motivated people, they are not very good soldiers and not very good warriors. But for now, it's like a very existential moment in this war. Because if we won't make our citizens defend their country, they won't be citizens of this country. Sometimes we get in our company, we get some people who are not very motivated, and we are training them, and we give them motivation to fight. So it's very depend on the commanders who are responsible for them, just to motivate, to give them a feeling that they won't die in the first battle, that they are doing something bigger than they are. So I don't know if I answered to your question, but yes, this is how we are trying to deal with that. Yeah, I know it's very controversial and very painful topic in Ukraine, but yeah, we are trying to deal with it.
And the second bit from Christina was, how do you think it's going at the moment?
I feel that, as Zelensky told, that it's going to some point of negotiations, because yes, Russians are continue to push, continue to attack us, but I think that those resources that they are put in their attack, they are not worth their resources. I mean that they spend too many people for their goals, which are actually they don't get.
For what? For a symbolic town or village?
Yes, yes, like Bakhmut, like Toretsk, like Avdiivka. It was a huge resources, actually. So it's very bad that sometimes Europe and US overestimate Russia and underestimate Ukraine. Yes, sometimes we let our territories, but we preserve our people who are much more valuable for us than territories. We will just wait while Russia, as any other dictator and imperialistic country, just will fall as it's going on all the time in the history. It won't be tomorrow maybe, but all in all it will happen.
Is there a growing belief that you will end up having to sacrifice some of Donbass for any negotiated peace?
I think yes. I think it's, of course, we don't want to do that, but if there are negotiations will be, I hope that the negotiators will take Ukrainian interests at first and will give us some guarantees. We are ready for the peace, and we actually
We've stated that.
we stated that in 1994 when we just when we gave up our nuclear weapon with no guarantees at all. Because I'm so sorry, but memorandum is not guarantees, and we also didn't have a strong army for the 30 years because we were not ready. I mean, we didn't want to make a war. We were just peaceful country who want to be a democratic, and we were trying to build it in our country. So we just want some guarantees for us. And one of the topic which President Zelensky told is to be a part of NATO. It might be some guarantees for us to let some territories. I think that in the end they will anyway return to us when Russia fall. But for now we really need some guarantees, and sure we will be preparing for another stage and another wave of war, unfortunately, while
Okay.
Russia is alive.
Okay, there's quite a lot of questions. We'll just go for this gentleman here. Sir.
Thank you very much indeed. Ewan Grant, UK Defence Forum. I did put a copy of Tom Clancy's farewell book on the table in front of staff in the EU delegation in Ukraine just after Crimea, and I urged them to read it. I'm not sure they did. My question for you all is, what message should we take from here to the waverers, the people who voice sympathies for Russia, which is often people who are silent when there is support voiced for Ukraine? What message do you want us to take to them? There are too many of them. There are far too many in Germany, and we're going to hear more.
Okay, do you understand that? So the waverers, the people who are not committed to Ukrainian victory and maybe hold a candle still to the possibility of Russia succeeding. So the people who are the waverers, it's an unusual word. What's the translation for that?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, the waverers, how should we treat them in a way in the UK? How do we deal with them? I think it's fair is the question here. Either of you, just a couple of sentences.
Right. Well, I mean, I think the book makes a very good point about justice. And when you look at the map, the geopolitical map, you should ask these people, what about justice? Because when you talk about peace, you're not talking about the just peace. No one, having peace is very possible. Putin could have made peace in 3 days as he planned. That was peace in his mind. It's very similar to what to the Lord of the Rings, if I may refer to the literature, when Sauron wanted to make peace in Middle-earth by conquering it, and enslaving everybody. That would be 100% peace. But that's the problem with it. That it is, well, it's a lie. And I think what the book does is it exposes that, that you may call it peace, but it doesn't. But it's not, in fact.
I would quote Ursula von der Leyen a week ago in the European Parliament in reference to Viktor Orban. She said, some people confuse the invader and the invaded. And I think it's really, really important to remember who started the war and why. And, was it a good idea for NATO to expand eastward? Maybe not. Certainly there were great minds like George F. Kennan, William Burns, who's now the head of the CIA and was ambassador to Moscow at the time, who advised against it. But you know, Ukraine is not yet in NATO. I don't know if it will be. If Donald Trump becomes president, it probably will not be. Maybe there were mistakes made by Western politicians, but that does not at all, not one iota, excuse what Russia has done. And I think that has to be repeated over and over and over.
If I can, okay. For people who are not very in the situation in Ukraine, I have very simple metaphor. For example, a burglar came to your house and he started to ruin your kitchen. And you started to negotiate with him. You will tell him, okay, you can take the kitchen, but please don't take the rest of my space. And how do you think will he do that? Of course, no. He just continued to ruin the rest of your space and the rest of your house. And this is what Russia do with Ukraine. So, I don't know, you can just ask burglar or murderer not to continue doing what he is doing, but he probably won't listen to you. So this is
Sorry, we'll take a question here.
One there, then there's a gentleman who's very keen.
Thank you very much for the talk, extremely insightful. I greedily can ask two questions. One to Nazar, I guess you have this incredible power in that you're expressing people's lives through you. Are you ever able to express your own views on the conflict, and have you been able to do that in the book? And then one question for Yulia, sorry. I remember when we saw the Kursk invasion into Russia, it felt like there was this huge empowerment of Ukraine, at least from the Western perspective in the UK. How did it feel for you being on the line? Did you have that same sense of empowerment? Thank you.
I'll go with the first question then. Thank you very much. Indeed, well, among translators, we usually say that we don't translate word for word, but meaning for meaning. And that was crucial to help Lara understand some of the cultural realias or cultural features that might be unknown. And I believe that part of my job was not just to render words, but also to explain the nuances of Ukraine, which, I mean, Lara hasn't been to Ukraine before, right? So that was her first trip. And even after her third trip, she was still asking a lot of questions. What is that? What does she mean when she says this? So indeed, it was that part of power, I suppose, to let the truth out to the English readers, so it makes sense.
I was very lucky to have Nazar, who's very well educated, very knowledgeable, wears it lightly, and has taught me so much. Thank you, Nazar.
My pleasure.
And the second part of the question was what the upsurge of excitement in the UK about the possibility
into Kursk.
So the more recent, as in yeah, okay. Did she share that on the ground? Yeah. So the recent your advance into Russian territory. Thank you. And there was an upsurge. You're absolutely right. I mean, it finally and thankfully made the headlines again in the UK, and people started taking notice again once you went onto Russian territory. How did that feel on the ground? Did that lift spirits?
Actually, it was quite inspiring, really. You know, for army which doesn't see some big victories for a long period of time, it's very significant to do something, I know, crucial or special. Yeah. And this is the first moment that it was really inspiring. Second one is to show that Russia is actually quite vulnerable, even against Ukraine, which are, I don't know, 30 in the list of the armies of the world. And third one, it's I think that's very right thing to bring the war to the territory who brings this war to ours.
So when
Because
you
basic-
heard, just describe the scene on the ground, because I'm presuming that you didn't know that it's going to happen in the Kursk region before it did actually happen.
Actually,
So
no.
what was on the ground? How did you all respond?
Actually, no. It was actually a surprise for us also. So I'm very proud of our military that none of militaries knew about this operation, because army is like a big village. So
just describe it on the
rumors
ground.
are spreading very good.
So when you heard, though,
Yeah.
just tell us how you heard and what happened. What was the immediate feeling and the reaction among your colleagues?
Actually, I found out it through the news in Telegram. We were just thinking that why we haven't done it 1 year before. In 2023, actually, it was after the Prigozhin. Yes. I think it was in that period of time. It was even more resultative than now.
Okay, let's have another question.
I'm going to stand up because I think it's more respectful. But hello, Yulia. Slava Ukraini, I should say to begin with. Thank you very much, all. My name is Piotr. I've got two questions. Very simply, the first one you mentioned about the role of women in the military. Now, when I've been in Ukraine in the past couple of years, a few times, one of the things I found very interesting is the sheer contrast of how the Ukrainian government approaches the treatment of women and involvement of women in the military versus the Russians and their treatment of Dagestanians, Chechens, and so on. So I'd like you to expand a little bit on that, because I was surprised by this, shall we say, disagreement you had with your friend about her view of her role potentially in the military or something. Secondly, though, I'm not going to go too much into the long term because I think we've covered that a bit. More about your relationship as an infantry woman and how you look at the strategic level and how the decisions made at the political and the relationship between the politics of Kiev versus what's happening on the front lines. If you've been satisfied or if you would prefer to see improvements done by some of the senior officers, because there's been corruption, there's been problems. Of course, it's nowhere the level of the Russians. But I'd love to hear your thoughts a little bit about how this can go forward in terms of Ukraine's ultimate grand strategy. Thank you.
Two very hard questions. First one, yeah.
It's fascinating in how you do see, it does seem as though the Ukrainian military is, may have evolved since, I imagine very dramatically, since 2014, but since 2022, I mean, I've seen a lot of female soldiers around Ukraine. So how has the attitude changed, if you like, and has it taken the whole of Ukraine with it, or is it just those on the front who think it's good to have a mix?
Yeah, sure. I maybe won't tell you the history about the women in Ukrainian families, that it's actually a very significant person and very like decision maker. I would say that I was in the army in 2016 at first. It wasn't too far from 2014. And second, my term was after the full-scale invasion. And actually, I felt not a big difference, but there was a difference. When I joined the army in 2016, there was not much of them in the army, and most of them were doing like bureaucracy stuff, I mean, documents or whatever, and not much of them were in combat positions. From the one hand, it wasn't so because some laws abandoned. It was prohibited for a lot of female to took a huge amount of combat jobs. A friend of mine, as my sister in arms, she actually was an assault.
She was an assault fighter.
Yeah, she was an assault fighter, but in the documentary she was sewer.
Yeah, she was just a she seems to be a tailor in an army.
Yes, and it's just it didn't give any like protection for women who are in the front line, because in the case they die, their family will get nothing for that. So in 1918, we all together, 20, sorry. We all together with veterans, women, female veterans, we made a huge advocacy campaign, and a lot of combat positions were opened for women. And now a lot of women can take the jobs they wanted to do, actually, not only in the staff, but also as a combat positions, and they are completely protected from the side of law. Of course, there are a lot of thing to do with. For now, we are we are advocating a law against sexual harassment, and not among female, but also for everyone who is in the army, because in the army a lot of LGBT people and so on. So for now, we are just advocating this law also.
You say, sorry to interrupt, but you say in your book, don't you, that you, on one of the first occasions that you get quite a senior role, that you have to make it very clear that there is no vulnerability, and that this is the advice to you: don't act like a woman, effectively. Don't look squeamish. Don't say, be like a man, is what they're saying.
Yeah, sort of. Yes, unfortunately, or no.
And you've done that in the sense that if you show vulnerability, people will take advantage, and advantage in the sense they'll try and get their own way and undermine your authority potentially.
Actually, that's an interesting fact, that I never was underestimated with my brothers in arms. I mean, soldiers. I was always I hear a lot of inappropriate jokes on me from high officers. I mean, they are quite like a Soviet-minded one. So which is why it's very predictable from them. But I actually don't really care about that. And the warriors whom I really respect, they treated with me also with respect. But sure, when I came to the unit, I need like a few months to get my reputation and my authority. And I think it's normal. When you came to the new surrounding, to a new job, you have to show how you actually work, so people started to trust you or respect you. So this is how it works in my military service. I just need to show my authority, not an authority, but my professionalism more.
I have to interject here two things in the book. When you first joined the army in 2016, they would not let you stand guard duty because you were a woman, and you had to fight for months to get the right to stand guard duty.
Yeah, and I gave a bribe.
To be on duty.
I gave a pack of peanuts to be on duty. And actually, I was the first. I was only one woman in the staff, and I was the first woman who were going on a duty. And in the end, when I transferred to the combat position, all who were on duty were women. None of the men.
After you, yeah.
And the other thing that was quite dramatic was when you went to military academy and became a commissioned officer the following year in 2017. You went back to Kharkiv, and you were assigned to lead the reconnaissance unit.
Yeah.
And more than 3/4 of the platoon defected.
Yeah.
They did not. They refused to be commanded by a woman.
They just left. But after that, some of them came and they thought, oh, this is not a very...
She knows what she's doing.
That is not a very bad idea to have a female commander. So okay.
And you're the only one in your brigade, platoon, the only female. There's no other. Are there any other women in your?
No.
Okay.
No other.
You just recruited a female drone pilot. You have one woman and 24 men, right?
For now?
Yeah.
Yeah, for now, yeah. For now, yeah. But
So one other woman.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. And there's quite a lot more about that in the book if you buy it, and because it is fascinating. There was a second part to that question, very briefly. It was just about
second.
grand strategy on the ground So grand strategy as in what the politicians are and the commanding officers back in Kiev are thinking and planning. How much do you think about that and cogitate on that on the ground?
I honestly saying I think about that much more than I should. I have a friend of mine, and she says that it's very difficult to change the structure being inside of the structure. The only one thing that I can do, and which I am doing, it's I am preserving my men from some sort of stupid ideas from my staff. And you just need to find a balance. It's very actually large question, but I can assure you that a lot of people, a lot of men, a lot of warriors who are now in the army, they are thinking how to change the stuff which are now. So, but we can't do that because of war, because it's like not a good time to like fight to each other in a stuff. But we are thinking how to make our army less Soviet one, and how to reduce the impact of that Soviet generals. And I think at least I am planning to move in that way, but being as a civilian one.
Okay, there are more questions. This lady, and then we'll come to you, sir, after that.
Thank you for coming and sharing your experiences with us. It's been a fascinating evening. Lara, you spoke about the possibility of analogy of a burglar in the house, and maybe you might let them in the kitchen and possibly give them Donbass, but you don't want them creeping through and taking the rest of the house. So I guess my question for you and Nazar is, if there is to be a negotiated peace, if that's the most probable or reasonable outcome, how safe will you feel, and how much can we trust Putin that he won't become the burglar stomping through the rest of your house in the short to medium term, please?
You're asking Yulia and Nazar what they will do if the Russians occupy all of Ukraine? Or, no.
It's about the burglar. Yeah.
If there's a negotiated peace, how confident and safe can you feel that Russia won't come and invade again in the short to medium term? Can you trust Putin with a negotiated peace in your country?
Definitely no.
I couldn't agree more. That's the point. That's very well said. You can't really trust someone who has been found distrustful and unfair so many times. So Yulia was referring earlier to one of the Zelensky's point to Ukraine's victory is NATO membership. Putin will only listen to power, and I believe NATO and the West has that power. And if this power would be on a scale of our guarantees, that would suffice for the time being. If the West is scared enough to do that, that will just give him more incentive to prepare another war. And inevitably, he will, launch another campaign in 5 or who knows how many years.
Are you happy with that?
Actually, I completely agree with Nazar. You don't have to trust Russia because it's already we say that the agreement made with Russia doesn't worth the paper which it's written on.
Bismarck's phrase. So.
Okay, we'll have the 2 last questions and then closing remarks.
Very brief question and a wider question. The brief question is, are all fixers really he? And the broader question is about going back to the fear of dying. And, going around those parts of Ukraine I did get to in August, the very moving tributes in all the cities and towns and the oblast capitals to the fallen, right across, along the main streets. And I'm sure that that doesn't happen in Putin's Russia. And, you know, I don't think it happened here, either in the First or Second World War. You know, there were war memorials afterwards, but I don't think we were really advertising the war dead to that degree. And does that connect, you know, to some of the people I heard who are hiding in their apartments in Lviv because they don't want to get caught by these vans and so on? You know, well, you know, so does it affect the fear of dying for some people?
Should we take the second question?
Yeah, that's a very good idea.
Well, they
I will ask, the fixer one, are there, because that's a very straightforward question, I've come across a couple of female fixers, but none in Ukraine. I'm sure there are some.
I had a female fixer in Sarajevo in '92, and I had a really lovely Serbian fixer in Belgrade in '99. And they were both great, not quite as good as Nazar, but almost.
Because that combination, the fixer thing, I won't digress here massively, but you know, fantastic at the language, brilliant connections, quite often journalists in their own right. So they were, that contact base is so important. We arrive completely fresh without really any contacts in the country, and you expect that we're riding on them to a degree. We expect them to be able to pump all their contacts for all the information. And my fixer in Ukraine, since 2014, we've always said that he had this extraordinary sixth sense. He's very quiet. He'll sit there in the back of the car. As I said, he's got a PhD in medieval history, but he's like a little hermit in the back of the car. And what he will do is he will suddenly just pipe up, I think we should go to Hostomel Airport, or I think we should go to, and we've given up questioning him, and wherever we've turned up, it was Belbek Air Base in Crimea, in Sevastopol, and it was where the Russians were first invading Crimea, and he happened to get it exactly right. And he's, you know, his talent is just knowing things are about to happen by tapping into social media, by talking to all his colleagues. He's the most disorganized man I've ever met. And that's saying something, because you know we're all very disorganized in my particular group in war zones. But his skill, is being able to detect where the next big move is. So, but on the serious question of attitude towards the dead, the war dead, and I think your point is just how important is that in lifting morale, or is it more why we do see that they're in a very different way to what it is in Russia, that deaths are commemorated, remembered. There's no secrecy about it. So the question, I suppose, is how important is that when you're on the ground? Let's put it like this. I suppose your question is how significant or how good is that for morale? I mean, can you read anything into it? Let's put it that way. Can you read anything into it that there is an openness in Ukraine and a commemoration of the dead, whereas in plenty of countries it's not mentioned because they don't want people to know how many have died, and because they'd prefer just to not mention it because they don't want any kickback from it. They don't want anybody kicking off.
Before I mentioned that we are trying to pull each of a fallen soldier on the battlefield, Ukrainian soldier, I mean. We are trying to pull their body. It doesn't matter how much left from them, but we did that. I had a case when the BMP blew up, and there was nothing left from a driver of this BMP. And for me, it was very, very important to find something from that person, from that soldier.
Just any body part.
Yes.
To get back to their family.
Yes, yes. Because in Ukraine, due to Ukrainian law, the soldier who wasn't found, I mean, whose body wasn't brought to the families, he just like missing person, despite that all his who was near him.
Yeah, so officially they will say missing in action.
Yes.
They won't say dead in action.
Yes, which is why it's for each of us, it's a significant to return the body to to the family. And I think that the number of losses, it's for now it's hiding, but we can imagine how many of people died, unfortunately. And it's not a demotivator, but it's rather more motivation to fight, because we have been lost so many wonderful people. And which is why I also don't fear to die, because I know how many we've already spent and lost.
Okay, thank you for that. One final question.
I hope you and the rest of the audience will forgive the narrowness of this question to you, Yulia. But as an experienced combat officer, how do you deal with, say, people who've arrived in your unit and who are just really frightened? Do you encounter that, and how do you help them?
It's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question, because
It's a difficult one.
actually we don't have like psychologists who can immediately help that person. I have one soldier who he was an assault. Remind me.
Assault fighter.
Yeah, he was an assault fighter. He took part in many battles, and I took him to my unit just to give him a chance to have some rest, because operator of drone, it's a little bit calm than to be an assault soldier. And in one day he just told me, I just can't go to the front line. I just thought, who I am to force him to do that. I never had a contact battle. I never shot to death my enemy, and so I can't judge what he felt. And I just gave him a work, very significant work for our unit. He's repairing drones, and we're saving a huge amount of money because we are doing that ourselves. And I just asked him how much time he will need. And he told me, I don't know. So maybe it might be a month, maybe it might be a few months. This is how we treat in our unit to those people. We just gave him another job, because there are a lot of many other work that should be done, and we're just trying to help them and support. So, and if it's concerned about those who already serve, and if you are talking about those who are new one, yes, for those both.
Like, how do you cope with someone who's terrified of having to do the job they're meant to do? What do you say to them when they're just frightened?
Honestly saying, we have lack of such cases, because I serve in a military intelligence company, and we have the chance to to take the best one. And in our unit, it's very shameful to fear, to feel fear.
To be ashamed,
Yeah.
to be afraid. Yeah.
But sometimes it might be. Sometimes a soldier can come to commander and say, I feel that I don't need to go right now in this battle. Send me to another one. But I feel that I really can't go now. His fellow will just replace him. And this is how it works in our unit. But not in all. I don't know what are doing other commanders actually with such soldiers, but I hope the same as we do.
Okay, that was a fantastic answer and really insightful. Well, we're just coming to an end now, and I've got to say, just sitting here and looking out over the audience, it is rare to see people concentrating and so captivated by what somebody's saying. Really, really unusual. Most people are dozing off and looking at the bar now, but people look as if they're genuinely interested, and we could continue for another hour, which we won't. But it's, you're a fantastic spokesperson for the Ukrainian Army and for what's happening there. And I hope people buy this book and read it and tell their friends about it. And I've got to say, it's one of the few books, having been to a number of war zones and seen some terrible things, it is one of the few books that brought me to tears. And so it's super powerful. So well done. Is there a final thing, Lara, that you'd like to say? I mean, congratulations on writing. It's beautifully done.
No, I'd like to thank Yulia and Nazar. And Yulia has given me a new comprehension of the meaning of the word courage. She really has. The last chapter of the book is entitled "The Miracle of Courage," and I think it is a miracle, you know, to risk your own life, to be willing to sacrifice your own life. It's not something I think most of us don't know what we would do in that situation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fantastic. So let's just have a round of applause for Nazar, for Lara, and for Yulia. Thank you.